So I wanted to pick up on the discussion on magic a bit, because I find that I've always viewed magic as being the word we use to explain things, a mechanism we don't understand. Something is happening, we don't understand it, and therefore it's magic. And as soon as something becomes magic, it occupies a non-neutral space. So it's not simply, well, this happened and I don't understand it. It's either good or evil. And this is why we pray to Poseidon. This is why we have a tree to Woden. And so as soon as you don't understand the mechanism, it takes on a character, and we anthropomorphize it. We give it intentionality. We assume it's part of a will. And this is why the ancient world is so much more magical and so much more interesting to read about. You know, the gods are doing things for reasons, and therefore the Trojans break and flee back to Troy. But then Patroclus dies, and you know, it's all part of Zeus's divine plan. It's like, okay, great. But as soon as you have a kind of mechanistic philosophy that's like, actually, the world is totally comprehensible, the disenchantment of the world is completely inevitable. And at that point, everything gets broken apart. And therefore, as soon as we can say, understand the human body, well, any magical sense that we had of it, of course, is desacralized with it. And so from the bureaucratic perspective, they can't help but say, well, it's dead. Yeah. It's no longer a person. It no longer has a metaphysical essence to it. There's nothing like, you know, it's Hume who said we spread our minds on the world. Yeah. Well, he's right. And actually that's a good thing. Actually, that was a good thing, because that made it important why Achilles desecrating Hector's corpse was such a big deal. There's something real human emotion that is attached to the things around us. And it's because of our lack of understanding. And as soon as we accomplish that, then suddenly this all goes away and we don't realize what we're doing to ourselves when we do it. This is why I'm pretty much against going into space. Why? Because we're going to find out there are no aliens, okay? Because aliens are the modern magic. They're the modern mythology. Oh, it could be anything. It's like, yeah, maybe. But we'll get out there and we'll find that it's not. And it's actually nowhere near as interesting as you thought it was going to be. And there's nothing that we can do to stop the desacralization of the entire universe. And C.S. Lewis had a great way of putting it as mere nature, right? It's the thing that we conquer. And this is the part of the thing, that turning stuff into mere nature is what we're going to do forever until we arrive at the point where actually we can just genetically engineer a human to pre-existing specifications, and nothing will be magical. There will never be any magic again. And the worst part about all of this, I don't think there's an end to it. I don't think there's a way of stopping it. I think this is totally inevitable, and I think we're screwed. I hate to say it. I just can't see the only way this ends is with some sort of giant civilizational collapse, where education just ceases and we go into a kind of dark age, and we develop a bunch of new magical mythologies about how the mechanisms of the world work. Yeah. Or, I mean, if you've got any better ideas, let me know. This is what Heidegger, I don't see how it happens.
Thought as well, similar to C.S. Lewis. He thought, beware turning the world into standing reserve. Don't set human beings outside the natural environment as kind of their masters, as the sort of Francis Bacon Empire of Man idea. Yeah. Because then you denaturize yourself from the surrounding environment that helped shape you to be who you are, cultivated those Homeric virtues. And when all the world becomes standing reserve as not Amazon rainforest, but Amazon product on an Amazon warehouse you can take, transplant everywhere else, exactly. Then where else do you have but to turn the standing reserve instinct inwards and make all of human nature a kind of set of composite parts that you can chop and change, until such a time where something that you didn't realize comes along, hits you like a ton of bricks, and you don't have the nature to adapt to it, and then the collapse comes.
You know, I don't know why, but it just struck me that maybe when you were talking about the sort of Protestant sacralization of the normal, maybe there is something to this, because it's not quantifiable and it's not mechanistic. The feeling of belonging and safeness and nostalgia that we end up getting for home. Right, and I think this justifies the sacralization of the normal. You know, it's the one thing I've learned as a father is what children need is predictability. They need to know that tomorrow is going to be like it was yesterday, like it is today, and that everything carries on normal for them to grow up healthy and happy and nostalgic for their own childhood. And this is a magical thing. I mean, until, of course, the scientists figure out how we can just tweak the brain chemistry to make that mechanically correct, at least we've still got that magic of the home that still exists. And so, I don't know why, it just came to me. It's like, no, the Protestants are right on this. We should sacralize the very mundane things that are just your mum getting up and doing the washing and your dad going off to work and stuff like this. There is something magical about that, actually.
All the greatest classics of children's literature grasp this point. They grasp and it's not so much the point that you can see the sacred, that you should see the sacred in ordinary, but that's the child sees the special, the unique, everywhere he looks. Alice is fascinated by absolutely everything. There's a kind of ordinary life is just sort of charged with wonder.
This is so totally true. Just a quick thing. My son, my 3-year-old son, my youngest son, is fascinated with any building tools, anything. And the second he sees a crane moving something,
it's incredible.
Oh my God! It's like God Himself is shining upon him. It genuinely. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah,
it's just, I just want to reinforce it's so true.
There's a wonderful passage where G.K. Chesterton talks about how we have grown older than the Father. We've grown older than God. That maybe the reason that the sun comes up every day is not mere mechanism, but because it just delights. It delights God to say, do it again, do it again, do it again. There's a kind of childlike sort of pleasure and delight in it. And I think, there is something to that. I mean, Plato talks about this, Aristotle talks about this, Nicholas of Cusa, a great 15th century Renaissance philosopher, talks about this. But the proper posture for all serious contemplation and philosophical inquiry into the deepest mysteries of the world is wonder, thaumasdein, and mirror, a state of mirror, I wonder, mirari, and a sense of an apprehension of the world as miraculous, as something that is a source of wonder, and that requires a kind of epistemic humility. It requires an alertness to our own finitude, fragility, fallibility. And those are virtues that liberalism can't cope with. Basically, liberalism cannot cope with virtues that involve limits, loyalty, humility, chastity, patriotism. These are all virtues that can only be expressed by recognizing limits or borders in some way.
It's fundamentally Promethean.
Exactly right. And so it can't cope, although there are certain virtues that do benefit from a sense of conquering and expansion and absence of limitation. A lot of the homely virtues, a lot of the virtues you need to sort of keep a family running okay, keep a village running okay, keep a city, keep a nation running okay, are virtues that presuppose a sense of our finitude, a sense of our kind of limitation. And so the basic sort of philosophical outlook of wonder and curiosity requires a certain humility in the face of the mystery of the world. Heidegger's great point is, in the question concerning technology that you referred to earlier, is that we don't do that. And what's interesting about Heidegger is, unlike Lewis, is he sees Christianity and he sees metaphysics itself as complicit in that covering up with the mystery of being, capital B, being itself. And anyway, he goes on, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But he does see technology as complicit with metaphysics, with a certain kind of metaphysical mastery of the world. What Descartes is doing, separating out all ultimate reality into thinking stuff and extended material stuff. Or Kant, separating out the noumenal from the phenomenal, or Hume, separating out matters of fact and relations of ideas, and that's all that reality is. That requires a kind of a sort of supremacy, sort of an aspiration to supremacy that Heidegger thinks issues very naturally into the kind of technological frame. He was a member of the Nazi Party from 1933 to 1945, famously, notoriously, never cut up his party his party papers.
Unlike Schmitt.
And Schmitt was he repudiated it later, but not before 1945. Heidegger's, the only comment he's really known to have made, apart from the black books that were published a few years ago, is that the worst thing about the Holocaust was that the Nazis had got intoxicated with technology. Now, you can imagine how awful that can sound.
Yeah, that does sound quite bad.
But he really did see this. He really did see that mass genocide as an enabling condition for the possibility of mass genocide was modern technology. And not just because of what it made instrumentally possible, but because it made it possible to think of human beings not as persons made in the image of God or freighted with an infinite dignity, but as stuff, just as industrial, quantities, just numbers.
Well, this was similar to the criticism that you've brought up before about Evola of post-Enlightenment warfare, of the gun fundamentally turned the human being into the operator holding it and a fungible unit rather than someone who had nobility and dignity meeting his enemy on the field of battle with a blade. So it industrialized warfare and it depersonalized warfare. That's why you get the First and Second World Wars as just such large-scale atrocities that wouldn't have been possible before the Industrial Revolution.
Who was it that said God created man, but John Colt made him equal? God made human beings, but John Colt made them equal. I think there's something to that.
I'd like to get back to the point about humility, actually, because this seems to tie in well with the concept of magic again. As in, the purpose of magic, if magic is an explanation for that which we are ignorant of, then you become it imposes humility upon you. And this is what the rituals are for, is to say, look, we're going to sacrifice our time, in fact, some of our resources in a sacrifice, to show that we are being humble before the universe, because we know our place in it. And then when you compare that to the liberal, technological, materialistic view, you just realize just how phenomenally arrogant it is. Not only to say, right, all of mankind is my constituency, but all of the universe is comprehensible by me. And I'm telling you, they really think that. They really think that everything in the universe, just give me enough time and I'll figure it all out. It's like, are you really saying the human mind is beyond limit? Like, I regard myself to be a fairly smart chap, but come on, there have to be things out there that we simply, as a fleshy mechanical organism, are simply beyond our comprehension.
This is what I say. This is what I mean when I say technology is demonic. It is a fruit that you can eat, and ye shall be as a god. It abolishes the humility that keeps human beings within the remit of being human. But one thing on the magic point I really wanted to pick up on, because you did a video quite a while ago on magic, rhetoric as a kind of spellcasting, which is relevant here. Linked in the description, please go watch it. Because you picked up on, I think it was Hume describing to Burke how Rousseau was so persuasive. And we took up and ran with that. And I think what you've been saying about the enchantment of the world through magic kind of explains why feminism was victorious and may have been the sort of first spearhead of this brand of liberalism coming to fruition. Because at the end of near the end of Simone de Beauvoir's Second Sex, this is something we covered, she said that men and women exist in antagonistic realities because men are persuaded by scientific evidence and think the world is masterable and wield reason as a tool of violence because they exclude women from the education that allows them to participate in the same thing. Whereas women, because they have the internal experiences, the kind of miracle of conception and birth, as you mentioned earlier, they can see the world as a series of miraculous, as magical. Men see it as miracles because the unexplained suddenly comes out of nowhere, they've got to explain it. Whereas women see the world as a kind of enchanted place because a series of processes that aren't quite comprehensible but are felt go on within her. And so maybe it's the vacuum of enchantment that liberalism created that allowed the persuasion of that kind of magical form of feminism to come to fruition and re-enchant the world in a maladaptive way. Now, obviously, she serves regime interests of where she now liquidates sex difference to...
On n'est pas né une femme, on la devient. We're not born one is the opening sentence of the Second Sex. We're not born a woman, we become one, which is, has embedded within it the kind of social constructionism that is so characteristic of feminism, but also a lot of other progressive pathologies. I mean, not that feminism is a pathology, but it's sort of so I mean, the explanation is that it's an attractive one, but it doesn't explain. It doesn't explain why the other kind of progressive sort of movements for sort of self-expression and a valorizing of identity or victimhood don't have a similar, why they emerge as well.
Because there's no technological legitimator. I think this is what Mary and Louise get right. The birth control pill turned the process inwards. It made you stand in reserve, whereas you can't do that for Right, well, you can do that. You can do it with sexuality, which is why trans is coming to fruition now.
Yeah.
So I think that might be.
Yeah, it's interesting, and then Weber's interesting on this idea of rhetoric as enchanting. I mean, he's got that famous essay, what's it called, Politics as Vocation, where the notion of the charismatic, the politician, the charismatic politician, the charismatic man, he's sort of touched with a kind of magic, and he can sort of intoxicate, and there's a sort of something very powerful about that. And that, I don't know if he actually makes this point in the essay, but that it kind of rhetoric and charisma can seem magical, or at least can operate on those expanses on which, enchantment has sort of vanished. It can sort of harness that kind of latent appetite for the magical and for wonder that disenchantment has evacuated.
I think one of the is a problem. One of the problems we face with this is that we are struggling from within a position of reality against an imagined perfect future. Right. This has always been the problem that any counter-Enlightenment thinker has had against the Enlightenment, against feminism. I mean, in the 70s, the slogan of feminism is "You can have it all." Well, who doesn't want it all? What a magical state of affairs. You're going to have everything. You're going to have a house, a husband, a family. You're going to have a career. You're going to succeed. You're going to have, you're going to be the first woman on Mars or whatever. What a ridiculous state of, what a promise. That's a massive promise. And this is the same promise we're hearing from the modern progressive movements now. So, you can become a woman. It's like, okay, fair enough. You can have the everything you want as a gay man that the heterosexuals have. You can have all of these things. These are ridiculous promises that are being made and will never end up being fulfilled. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see such rates of depression in these communities, is that there are phenomenal promises being made. Obviously, they attempt to get to them, but the reality never matches up to the dreamlike state that was, first sold to them. And where are we now?
Yeah. No, I mean, I couldn't, so feminism is a kind of Faustianism, and progressivism is a kind of development of the Faustian pact. It's a kind of...
But they all, as you were saying, they all have this built into them because it's based on a promise of a kind of utopia that's just never going to be achieved.
It's an ideological monkey's paw.
Kind of, yeah.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.